Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Fran and I in the Hopenning in episode number 127. And we are very happy to introduce our friend and colleague, Bey Mc Callaghan, today as our wonderful guest. Let me tell you a little bit about Bey. Bey has a strong foundation in psychology and teaching, and combined with training as an RTT, rapid transformational therapy therapist, practitioner, Bey brings a compassionate and result-driven approach to personal and professional development. With over 25 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and mental health care industries, Bey deeply understands the vital connection between mental health, performance, and overall well-being. Specializing in uncovering the impacts of trauma and limiting beliefs, Bey helps individuals identify and overcome barriers that hold them back in their personal and professional lives. RTT serves as a cornerstone of his work, facilitating profound shifts in mindset and self-awareness to unlock each client's full potential. Bey is addressing the challenges of toxic work environments and is passionate about fostering supportive workplace cultures. And they focus on identifying the root cause of these harmful dynamics and driving meaningful change. So, Bey, that's in a nutshell. I didn't even read all of it. That's quite a lot. So thank you for being with us today and for talking to us about mental health in the workplace.
It's a huge pleasure, and thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Okay. You know, we've, the three of us have had jobs before we became rapid transformational therapists. And we were drawn to this job for a particular reason. So what was your history, actually? What got you to the place you are right now, Bey?
Yeah, you know what? I think for me, the reason is you reach a stage in corporate where, for me, it wasn't fulfilling anymore. That was the important thing. But then I wanted to get back to my roots and do something where I feel I could make a difference. And now the reason for my interest in toxic work environments is because I've witnessed that firsthand in a couple of companies that I worked for, and I've seen the devastating effect it can have on people. And it's actually sad that that's the type of environment that some people can end up in, and it's really devastating.
Bey, you and I have known each other for quite a while, and as you can hear, we kind of have a similar accent. So hint, hint. Bey is also from South Africa originally, and he's been in Canada now for 14 years, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
before that, he was actually in New Zealand. So Bey, you have a huge passion for mental health in the workplace, basically because of your experience in impact on your own life.
Yes.
So I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what can you tell us about that?
That's absolutely fine. You know what? When we initially immigrated to Canada, I had the choice between two jobs, and unfortunately, I picked the wrong one, and I ended up in a situation where it wasn't a very stable work environment. It was something that was created to try and relaunch a product. And the people that oversaw the operation of the business was absolutely ruthless. They had X amount of money to make the business work, and they basically ran us into the ground. And I mean, you're in a new country, you're dependent on a job. And what happened in our situation is, I flew down for the first meeting, and I was sitting in the meeting room or the boardroom, and the guy that ran the whole show said that, pass rate for all exams 90%, and if you don't pass, you're losing the job. And quite a few of us actually had almost like a little nervous breakdown because you're, like I said, dependent on that salary. But I mean, everything went from bad to worse. It was very, very abusive. And basically, it was a mix of bad leadership, bad communication, and just bullying, absolute bullying. So, yeah, does that sort of answer your question, Marina?
Well, LaBey, what were the red flags? Were there red flags that you didn't heed, that you didn't pay attention to?
It's very interesting that you ask that question because I ran into someone a couple of years after my experience with these guys, and he actually applied for the same position. But it's a Canadian guy, and Marina sort of knows my background as well. Yeah, I was raised in an environment where things had to be done a certain way, and you had to have this disciplined approach to everything. So almost the perfectionism. So every situation I walk in I have that anxiety. I'm still trying to seeking approval, that kind of thing. This friend of mine is completely laid back, and he went in, and he actually told me, said, "LeBay, I interviewed for the same position, and he actually got the job, but he declined it." And in that nice and relaxed state, he said he did pick up on some red flags. Immediately, the way he was being addressed in the meeting, the questions they asked, and then small little things about how they actually manage the business. For me, I was so focused on overperforming and focused on myself that I didn't pick up on the red flags, and only later started picking up on those red flags, which is it's something that I've pondered over the years, why that actually happened. Marina and I once had a bit of a conversation around this. And after I left, I actually just resigned and I left the company after about 7 months. But, you sort of pondering, the whole situation. I had a lot of anger afterwards. I was just really, really angry about the whole situation. And there's a couple of things. I think there was a lot of injustice that I saw happen with myself as well as my colleagues. A lot of them resigned and left as well. Just the violation of values. There was no ethical and moral values. And the other thing is, I should have known better. I kept telling myself that you should have known better. And it took me, I would say, more than a year to get rid of that anger, and I've seen that since in a lot of people that have left toxic work environments, that self-blame that's going on.
It's almost like a PTSD that remains. So it's just
It is.
almost like when you go into a new position, now you have that expectation and almost that fear. I want to switch gears a little bit. I looked this up quickly before we started, and it is the cost of mental health. And we are all in Canada. And in Canada, and this actually shocked me because this is actually the numbers for 2019. Now, we
Mm.
all know in the last 4 years, a lot happened in our societies that I know for a fact affect mental health. In 2019, the mental health in Canada cost our country $50 billion.
Yes.
And then I looked up another one. The In the workplace alone, it is I don't know when this was, but there's a projection here. The estimated cost in the workplace alone in Canada is $20 billion, but there's a projection that by the year 2041, mental health or poor mental health in the workplace will cost the Canadian economy above $2.5 trillion.
Yeah. It's absolutely frightening, Marina. The current number just for lost productivity is sitting at 29 million. And the American Psychological Association did a survey. It's like a North American survey. And 19% of people report that they're either in a toxic work environment or that it's sort of semi-toxic, if I can put it that way. So it's terrifying, the loss in revenue. And we sometimes look at one category and we say, okay, it's mental health, but then you look at things like turnover rates, and there's a cost associated to that. And you look at lost productivity, there's a cost associated to that. Yeah, it's just absolutely frightening. And there's other downstream impacts as well, because you find people that end up in toxic working environments, and I'm specifically talking about people that walk away with trauma, and it's called workplace induced trauma. There's career avoidance after that. A lot of them don't want to get back into the work environment, Um, yeah, so that also impacts the job market.
Interesting. In my own history, I saw that a lot with teachers that had a bad experience in their first 3 years. The first 3 years, when they got out of that environment, they did not return to teaching. So that would mean not only are we losing a good person as an educator, we are losing their 4 years of education, or 5 years or more if they've got a multiple degree. So the cost, I wonder if that's been figured into it, the cost of the education that they paid to be in that career.
That's a
And
good point. Yeah.
I think in Canada, we do pay a lot, but there's other countries in the world, especially the United States, where the cost of a university education, of a degree, one degree or multiple degrees, is staggering. So what is the solution? Like, I mean, maybe that's a little premature to ask that of you, but what have you found works well with people who come to you with a type of PTSD because of toxic work environments?
Yeah. So I just want to take a step back, and you talk about teaching, and just there's something that popped into my mind. I mean, if you're a traumatized teacher, you feel you're in a toxic environment, how do you actually show up in class?
Mhm.
And what type of impact does that have on the kids you're teaching? So that's yeah, that was sort of something that I was thinking of. Um, how to address toxic work environments, just overall, not necessarily individuals. There needs to be leadership accountability, and if you're in a company where that does not exist and the toxicity it comes from the top, so it's that top-down toxicity. It's very difficult to change. There needs to be clear policies in place when it comes to things like toxic behavior and bullying, that kind of thing. They also need to have mechanisms, and I think that's where it's very, very important that if the company doesn't have that, to bring people in, but look at psychological safety and just sort of define what psychological safety is. You'd be amazed at how many people actually don't know what psychological safety looks like. The ability to be able to say how you feel, what stresses you, and the impact people have on you. And then the last thing, and the thing that I'm really passionate about, is wellness programs. Um, and I want to say having an email sent out on Mental Health Wednesday that was created in ChatGPT is not a wellness program. So those are the important things. Now, where I see people, and I've dealt with people that suffer from occupational trauma, I there's a couple of things. I think it's very, very important to see where is it actually coming from, their experience. Is it something that relates to something else? I mean, in my case, I've got this tendency to want to overperform. I'm very critical of myself and that kind of thing. So, that's how I show up in the work environment. So that's the first thing. If it's really a toxic environment, I usually recommend, and this is in line with Dr. Robert Sutton. He wrote the book, The No AL Rule. If it's really a toxic environment, I always recommend that people exit the environment. So not all of us can just resign and leave, but to work with the individual, look at how they can better manage the situation, how they can actually build resilience, what they can learn from it, and also using the time in a smart way. You can reskill, you can go and study something different as well, which changes your focus a bit. But it's also, if you work on an active exit strategy, you're a bit more positive and driven and that kind of thing, and then just manage them basically out of the work environment. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine about this. I don't know one single person that have worked on a proper exit strategy and have actually left the toxic work environment that's not in a better position today. Um, and I think therefore it's really important to also look for help if you're in a situation like that. So
Gosh. Yeah. I want to touch on something that you just mentioned briefly, and that is that individual perspective that you show up as an individual at the workplace, and everything you believe about yourself, about life, is based on your belief system about yourself, which we all know is formed from the last trimester of pregnancy up until 7, 8 years old. And if that belief system is on a crumbling foundation, how
yeah.
does that impact your mental health, not just in the workplace, in everything else? But I think it's you who told me that when there's quite a large percentage of people, when they start a new position, they already look for the next one.
Yes, there's about
And
16% of people that within the first few weeks are looking for another job, and they call it active disengagement. So they're there, they show up on time, they do what they have to do, but they're already looking for something else.
so that must be, if I'm not wrong, that foundation. It's not that the workplace is flawed, it's the belief in themselves. So talk more to us about
Yeah.
that.
So something that I've noticed with a couple of people is they and I mean there's people that bring this from childhood where they they've been in situations where there's a certain standard they have to maintain. If they don't do that, there's a bit of bullying, whether it's coming from the parents or the teachers and that kind of thing. Well, those past traumas, and there's a lot of different things we can talk about. Or people that have left toxic work environments and end up in new companies. We talk about hypervigilance. So, with a lot of people like that, they end up in a work environment and it's how they interpret the situation. So, Bob, the boss, walks past and doesn't say good morning. Now, suddenly, someone interprets it as I must have done something wrong, and he's angry at me, and that ruins the rest of your day. And you become overly sensitive. And the problem with that is, and I had this with one client, that's how he started viewing management as people that are very critical of how he does things and his behavior. And I think people start playing off each other. You know, you don't have the same openness and friendliness if you distrust the person that you're reporting into. So it's very important when you work with clients like that to 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 look at what the root cause is, and then move forward from that. And in all honesty, even if it's a toxic work environment, you might find something in the past that is not benefiting them in how to properly manage the situation.
Well, my question is, what's the tipping point? Is the tipping point for everyone different? Like you can put up with a boss who doesn't say good morning to you in the hallway, or you can put up with a boss who only throws out the Wellness Wednesday, have
Yeah.
a happy Wellness Wednesday. But what is the tipping point for most people? Like in your experience, where when do they say enough is enough? I feel like taking the day off. I feel like I'm burnt out. Uh, I don't know if I want to do this job anymore.
Yes. There's a couple of things that I look for. If there's emotional issues, so they are starting to feel anxious about going to work, they're anxious within the work environment, mild depression, if they don't function well cognitively, so they start struggling with memory and that kind of thing. Physical health is a big thing. I've seen people develop cardiovascular issues because of ongoing work stress. Um, if their behavior starts changing, you're talking about avoidance behavior. Marina and I were talking about someone that I know quite well that literally got up the one morning to go to work and couldn't get up and was lying in bed for 2 days. So that's really, really not healthy. And then I want to say these PTSD-like symptoms that people develop. Any of that, it's not a healthy environment. And the problem with workplace trauma is that what usually, if you have that prolonged exposure to the abuse and the trauma, that's where things start going wrong. I think we're all resilient enough to deal with difficult situations over the short term, but we're not made to be in a toxic work environment for 6 months, a year, or even longer. So
Yes.
I can't remember the exact number. I think it's so in mountaineering, they talk about, it's like a threshold in mountaineering. If you go above, I think it's 7,000 feet. If you go above 7,000 feet, you've got a limited time to get to the peak of whatever you're climbing and then coming back because your body gets, there's a lack of oxygen and your body literally starts dying. And I sort of compare that to the 7,000 feet. We can all go above 7,000 feet for an X amount of time, but if it's too long, your body literally starts dying. And workplace trauma causes that. It's what you can tolerate as an individual as well. It's different for most of us, but yeah, I think long-term exposure not recommended at all.
You know that COVID has changed quite a lot in how people work today. And even I just came back from something downtown, and it's actually shocking that there, compared to other years, it's not that busy downtown. And so a lot have changed. A lot of expectations have changed. And there's so much that you mentioned, Lebay, and it makes me wonder what at the end is the solution? Because you talk about management and how do you reach management level people to say, "Hi, I can help you," and go all the way from that down to the guy who feels so bad about himself he doesn't get out of bed for 2 days. How
Yes.
do you marry those two and really help people?
This brings me back to just overall wellness programs. I think companies should spend a lot more time on these types of programs, and it's currently not happening. We love saying that we're in a mental health crisis, but I don't see the appropriate management of those healthcare crises. And there's a lot of stories I can tell about that. Some, unfortunately, I can't mention here. But I think it's having programs available where you can actually work with leadership, and where there's that grassroots approach where you talk to staff, and you make ongoing support available. That's the way we're going to have to approach it. COVID had a huge impact, and I talked to a friend of mine who's in medicine a while back, and we were talking about, he teaches at one of the universities, and he talked about, post COVID, how young people actually respond to situations. So we talk about fight or flight, but he's seeing a lot of freeze now as well, where something goes wrong and there's no fight or flight response, it's a freeze response. Um, and he also mentioned something around frontal lobe development, where he said your frontal lobe, their frontal lobe is underdeveloped. And I asked him exactly the same question. I said, so how are we going to change this? Because they don't communicate very well. We have a problem with electronics and cell phones, which is an absolute addiction. And then you've got people that freeze in critical situations, and they're going to do that in the work environment as well. And his response was simple. He said universities and schools are going to have to accept some kind of responsibility to change it around, and then corporates will have to do that as well. Otherwise, it's not going to change, and I think it's actually going to get much worse. One of the things that's started happening now is with toxic work environments is Gen Z have a tendency to report everybody around them. The problem is, I think they sometimes overreact with what's happening in certain situations. But it isn't being noticed in the media as well. Business Insider, the New York Post, the Times, all write articles on workplace toxicity and how it should be managed. But even with that, I don't see companies and organizations respond appropriately.
I actually want to bring Fran into this, Fran, because you are coming from a teaching career for many, many years, and now you are involved at a university. How do you see this gap that was created in the way I always think about it is that when a child doesn't crawl before he can walk, apparently there's some missing link somewhere. And so during those 2 years that everything came to lockdown, and especially young people who were at that crucial age of learning how to communicate, what do you see? What is the impact where you are working?
Definitely. The students that came into kindergarten after the lockdown was removed. So there was so much masking, right? Because we had to mask in schools. Those small kids, for a big chunk of their entire life before kindergarten, they could not see anybody's bottom here. So just being able to speak was different, because if your parents, who you're locked down with, are continually texting, scrolling, whatever, and not speaking to you, you don't have the opportunity to see how words are formed. So coming into kindergarten, vast majorities of kids now entering kindergarten have speech difficulties. So speech difficulties will transfer into communication difficulties, will transfer into reading difficulties and writing difficulties, and so on, all the way up the chain. So that's one of the things. The kids that came into kindergarten after the lockdown as well did not know how to socialize. So even in a fun environment, which was like the gymnasium, I was told by the kindergarten teacher that there were some students who would cry as soon as they got to the gym because it was too loud, too much commotion, too much movement, too much going on. And they would sit in the corner and then tell their parents they had no friends. So it was just this real breakdown in a system that we just did not see coming, right? But that huge bump is going to move right through the system and will eventually end up in the university systems as well, and will eventually end up in the workplace. So that 0 or last trimester of pregnancy to 7 years old or 8 years old, crucial. It's crucial. So we need even more things in place in schools first, right? Or even preschools, to address the lack of speaking skills and the lack of just general being able to talk with and communicate and get along with people, because it's like like you said, the Gen Z,
Yes, yep, Gen Z, yeah.
Gens, because they're overly reporting workplace abuse, overly reporting it. I think the children that are going to be coming up and through now are going to have something even totally different than that, because their parents are whatever was going on with their parent is raising them before they get into the school system. So, yeah, I can see big problems coming.
Absolutely. So, Fran, I don't know if you agree with this, but someone commented in an article that apparently with these young kids, newborns too, and I think they said 4 or 5 years old, you do see lower IQ in those kids as well because of developmental difficulties, if I can put it that way. But yeah, and I agree with you. I think there's actually a disaster coming. The interesting thing is, I mean, we're I would like to monitor university admissions and see what's happening with that over the long term. Are we going to see lower rates of university admissions, and what is the overall performance going to be?
I
And in
think
schools
that
as well.
I think there's going to be a lowering of standards
Yeah.
because you need to have X and O amount of people into those jobs, whatever those jobs are. As baby boomers continue to retire,
Yeah.
those jobs need to be filled by someone. So I think they're going to be sending people through the system, the whole system, right from kindergarten all the way to postgraduate, that don't have the same qualifications of the people that they're replacing. And that might be a bold statement, but from what I see in both the school system itself and past grade 12, I see a difference. I see a difference in standards.
Absolutely. And in some, I mean, I come from the healthcare arena, and I had someone make the comment that what they are seeing with the newer generation ending up in these healthcare jobs is that they want to diagnose through the system. They want to, I always want to say, Google the symptoms and see what it says, and then they want to follow the hospital guidelines or protocols as to how to treat. The problem with that is there's less critical thinking, and that's slowly disappearing. And that's my big. I love AI. I like ChatGPT, but I think it's going to impact our kids' abilities to think critically and creatively as well. And then with all of this happening, and you attach this to it, um, I don't know. We might have to all go and live in the mountains.
I know you will survive. I don't know if I will.
We'll grow
Great.
potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because, Fran, even with what you said is, I never thought that, I mean, a big part of our communication is facial expression.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say a sentence with a flat face or a smile on my face or an angry face, and it has a completely different meaning. So if a kid never learned, because everybody was masked, how to read facial expressions, how do they know the difference? I never
Yes.
thought about that. That was a really good point.
Yeah. And we're made to be social beings. We're made to interact with people. I mean, if and it's really interesting. If you compare young people today to the elderly, I would say 20, 30 years ago, we had a huge problem with the elderly feeling isolated. Basically, they were the outcasts of society. And, we had to come up with strategies to get these guys incorporated into programs and that kind of thing. Now, if you talk about having friends and being socialized and stuff like that, the elderly are the guys that have the friends that interact and are social. If you talk to young men, you say, how many friends do you have? Most of them will have between 0 and 3 good friends that they can have conversations with. But our young people are increasingly reporting that they feel isolated, they feel alone. And with all of that, you get the risk for suicide, depression, and that kind of thing. And it's also been proven the more isolated you feel, the more isolated you become. And there's a chemical process that happens in your brain when that happens. So that's also scary. So everything's upside down.
It's interesting what you're saying. And I think about how we've got the toxic workplace around us, But if we've also are looking at this workplace with our own toxicity, right?
Yes.
Then where, how, we talk about wellness programs. What kind of wellness programs? I mean, I can think about what we can do at school, but how about for the people that are already in the workplace? Like, how will they build that in? What are some suggestions about building in that?
I like and I had a chat with a friend of mine this morning. She teaches soft skills. And I think it's really important to have those types of focuses. I think there's the type of therapy that we do that can be of value to everyone. I think everybody on this planet can do with an RTT session. That's the first thing, just because it helps you to be a lot more well balanced and emotionally healthy. But then the other thing is to literally teach these guys communication, soft skills, how to interact with people, the value of relationships and communication. And if we don't do that, we're on a fast road to nowhere, if I can put it that way. But um, yeah, it's a challenging thing, but this is a huge can of worms. Like you said, you hit the nail on the head. We've got toxic work environments. We've got these guys coming up through the system as well that are going to end up in leadership positions. Now, can you imagine someone that doesn't interact well with people around them? They don't communicate very well. They're very introverted, end up in leadership positions because they do very well, job wise. But what kind of leadership is that going to be? So you've got that, and then we bring our own traumas into it. And in all honesty, COVID was a very traumatic event for most people, but I think more so for young kids. And like you said, Fran, I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. So if we don't remedy this now or come up with strategies, we're going to have serious long-term issues.
Right. It always makes me think, in our prison systems today, the ultimate punishment is not a death sentence anymore. It's to put somebody in isolation, in
Yeah.
solitary confinement. But yet we've done that with society.
Yes.
And it's very interesting, very, very interesting way this communication has flowed
Yeah.
into that. So, Levi, what I hear you say is that you start to reach companies from the top down so that you can reach that upper management to create a new work environment that's so friendly to even the person with the trauma within their own individual being can come to a place where they feel safe. Because we do spend, when you have an office job, you do spend the majority of your day, of your life at work.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Marina, and something that when I look at that I can add is it's also when you deal with people to bring them to the realization that we all have different personality types, and different personality types respond differently to certain situations. Um, and when you think about that, you're less judgmental when it comes to people's behavior around you. Um, because you sort of leave room for personal differences,
Mm.
which is also a big problem. But what I see currently with companies as well is, and I mean, it's not possible to do this in every job and that kind of thing, but people get boxed. So you've got a job description. This is what you're supposed to be doing. If you step outside the job description, there's issues. And it doesn't, someone might be in a position where they have to do some admin, they have to do some sales, for instance. I'm using examples now, some sales, some customer service and that kind of thing. But you've got an introvert that's great at the administrative side, but now suddenly they have to fulfill those other functionalities, and they can end up being seen as underperformers. Or you've got someone that's extroverted, love dealing with customers, and sales hates administration. So I think we have to have a bit of a different approach when it comes to those skill sets as well. Um, and yeah, companies need to start taking these personal surveys or personnel surveys a lot more serious. I think sometimes it's just something that they run through the system because it's expected of them.
And not only that, I'm thinking whoever hires them, right? Whoever hires them for that management level needs to be hiring people whose skills complement each other.
Yes.
So if you've got a team of admin that, yes, this person is really good at the book work, and this person is really good at the people, and we work together so that all categories are covered, rather than having a top heavy administration that is too focused on one thing, whether it's the numbers or whether it's peopling. I think most healthy organizations have to have a variety in the top level. Otherwise, we will get unhappy people. We will get the ones that are continually looking for something better. And then the turnover rate and the productivity goes down as we continue to retrain people for the same position.
So, Fran, in the US, if you look at high turnover rates, they're sitting at 223 billion in losses because of high turnover rate. And if you look at lost productivity, people that do show up at work, it's 777 billion in lost revenue. And why I'm sort of mentioning that is I think our approach to corporates are changing as well. And it's also coming from Gen Z. There is a lot of platforms where you can actually go and look up a company. You can get sort of testimonials from people. And I think these companies, if we don't adapt and we don't create healthy work environments that are balanced, people will not work for you. If people work for you, it might be because they're desperate for a job. So that's the one thing. If you don't adapt and we don't change these toxic work environments into something that's psychologically healthy and it builds people and it strengthens the corporation, these companies won't survive. They just won't. And I mean, I look at it from a company point of view as well. You want to be productive. You want to be revenue generating. You want to grow as a business. But it's important to realize that you do that on the backs of people. Richard Branson said that the most important thing is your people, and that still rings true. And I think somewhere along the line we've also lost that a bit. So yeah, Fran, in general, what do teachers say about the whole current situation? You must be talking to a lot of people.
Well, teachers in general, what I would have to say, their heart isn't in it anymore.
Yeah.
It's not their path, it's becoming to the point where it's not something that they're passionate about. Yes. They get into it being very passionate, and then they see the realities of it, and it's too hard. The job is just too hard in order to be passionate about it. And so it just becomes a job, and which is who suffers, right?
It's so sad. It's so really sad. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it
makes
all.
me think, Fran, that you have a daughter who is a first responder.
Yeah.
And I mean, the PTSD and the mental health in that alone, I've had people approach me about family members who are EMTs who sits with tremendous PTSD. And yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, and that is the truth. The teachers think they have it hard, but when you're a first responder and overworked, very overworked, very, it's not that you're not valued. You are valued. However, some of the situations are such that you don't have to be a first responder to deal with this. You need to be a mental health practitioner that should have dealt with this before, right? So I'm looking, corporate, LeBay, you understand corporate. I understand government systems, which is more healthcare, schools, social work, and all of that. And there are problems in government systems. And it's not the people that are doing the footwork where the problem is. That's not the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, we're looking at an environment where people are just not happy. And that's terrible to think that, you get up and you go to work, you slog through the day, you get back home, you have dinner and go to bed to do it all over again. That is literally not life. And I think we need to go back to the term quality of life, and how do we define that? In the Middle Ages, I was reading that in the Middle Ages, people only worked about 178 days a year. So they might have been, farmers on some marquise land, but they had a lot of downtime. And
Well, life was so much less complicated then.
we need to get back to being uncomplicated, Marina. If we
I
don't,
wish.
I'm off into the mountains.
Yeah, that's for
But
sure.
it's way too complicated. We're not made for that.
Yeah.
So it just triggers a question for me though, because is it really the responsibility of any workplace to make people happy? I mean,
I don't.
happiness in the end, I think, is a very individualized thing. And
Yeah.
you can put a person on the best place ever, and they will still find a reason to complain if they have this unhappiness within themselves. So what is the fine line between that?
I think I almost want to say, and I agree with you. The Americans say the pursuit of happiness, and it's almost like it's something that you have to pursue. You don't always reach that. I don't think it's any corporation or any company or structure's job to make people happy, but I think having well balanced uh, psychological environments, I think, is important, and that to me doesn't even have anything to do with happiness. It's just a healthy environment. It's like sticking a seed into healthy soil. It's a place where you grow. You can be all you can be, if I can put it that way. And I think that's where it comes down to, you know.
Mhm.
So it's like creating psychologically safe environments, and it's not just for staff. Remember, if the company survives, they do well, staff do well
Yeah,
as well because they get paid.
right.
Yeah.
I think in order to create healthy environments, we need to have healthy leadership.
Yes.
Like people in leadership who really understand their own psyche and their own personality types, as well as their own baggage and their own biases. So, I mean, my baggage and my biases, as long as I know what they are, I can see them creeping in, and then I can deal with them before they affect other people, the other people in my environment. Because if I am thinking something, I can look at that thought, like the fly on the wall, and go, is that rational? Is that kind? Is it necessary? Is it, is it truth? Is it,
Yeah.
is it accurate? Before I would affect or infect somebody else with that thought.
Yeah. I had my first job in pharma was the CEO's name was a guy called Steve Moritz, and he up to today, he passed away a couple of years ago. He's my hero. He is everything that I want to be when it comes to, a leader and that kind of thing, and even in my house. But there's two things that always stand out about Steve, because I spend a lot of time over the years. What made this guy different? Um, compassion for his staff. He truly cared, and vulnerability. He was He was a guy that didn't care about being a vulnerable individual. When I had my bad experience with the company we discussed, he was in Australia at that stage, and he picked up in I don't know, I made a little post on Facebook or something like that. He phoned me from Australia and said, "Lebey, things are not going well with you. What's up? Let's talk about it." Even though I wasn't even working for him anymore, we were in different countries. This guy had that incredible compassion for people around him, and I think if we can train leaders and get leaders to just regain that compassion for people, and if they don't have that, then perhaps they should be in a sitting on a desk in a basement somewhere. But it's compassion, vulnerability, and yeah, respect for people around you, respect for yourself as well, respect for the company's time.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, leadership has changed so much over the years. And I think, for us growing up in South Africa, there was this system where there was a lot of abuse. Let me just put it like that. In everything. If you're the boss, you probably get things done by screaming, by putting people down, and in households, very, very similar in my experience anyway. So, um, but now we talk today about a much softer approach, and you talk about this, Steve Maritz, and I'm thinking of two of the people that my husband encountered in the workplace over the years, and their relationship driven, compassionate, soft approach, and the success of that. And to me, that's the ideal. That
Yeah.
is, yeah, people want to work for them
Yes.
because they
Marina.
are such amazing people.
Yeah.
Is that
Steve.
born or is that made?
Yeah. Steve Maritz never pushed us. He was not someone to crack the whip. But I remember times where I was supposed to finish at 5 o'clock in the afternoons, where I show up at a clinic, and I know the doctor's got like an evening shift until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I would sit in that reception. The one time it was 7 o'clock at night, and I was sitting there waiting to see the doctor and have a meeting. And it was because I was doing it for my brothers and sisters. It's going to sound very fluffy, but the guys I worked with, I was doing it for Steve. And Lundbeck, the company I worked for, it wasn't just a company; it was our company. But it was a healthy, it was a safe environment, but it was also a competitive environment in the sense that it was good competition. And I haven't seen that in a long time, that type of thing. I still have contact with most of my Olympic colleagues from those years. I'm not going to date myself, but we talk about this, and it's a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating topic. Where did we actually go off the rails?
Mhm.
And now we've got all these other dynamics coming in, that's going to create more of a destabilization of this environment. Yeah.
Well, okay, I'm hoping that the pendulum swings back,
Oh, me
right?
too.
Because if we're up here right now, where people are not wanting to go to work, not passionate about their job, looking out elsewhere within months of stepping into that position, I'm hoping that in leadership and in the executive positions that they become more compassionate and more kind, more respectful, more caring for the actual human beings
Yes.
that are in their care.
Yeah.
Because it otherwise, otherwise, yeah, I agree that the corporation will not, and whatever job it is, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
They're not going to get the employees there.
And Fran, and I'm hoping for that as well. The friend of mine that I was talking to this morning that do the soft skills training, she was actually approached by a company to do training for its people that work for the company, but it's newcomers, and it's newcomers' spouses to do some coaching and training for them. Isn't that amazing that the company is willing to go above and beyond to that extent?
Yeah.
To realize that people are so valuable that they form part of a family unit, and we need to be supportive across the board.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, Lebey.
Wonderful.
So lastly, what is your message of hope?
My message for hope is that if you're currently experiencing an environment like this, I mean, I'm an example. Things always get better. That's the one thing. It always gets better. But the amazing thing is you learn a lot from it, whether it's around the environments, but about around your personality as well. Something that always stands out is, when I deal with clients is it's they all have certain strengths and characteristics that some of them didn't even know they had. And sometimes, Marina, when you and I were talking about a week ago, we were talking about, the lighthouse and talking about situations that we see as traumatic events, but the fact that a lot of those situations are learning opportunities. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is the more people, come through some of these situations, the better leaders we'll see down the
Yeah.
line, because these people end up in leadership positions and they know what not to do.
Yeah.
So friend, that's probably how the pendulum's going to swing
Yeah.
back, eh?
Yeah, I agree. It's like if you don't want that, then do different.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you, LeBay. It was wonderful meeting you and having you on the show and talking about toxic work environments and that there is hope, that there are corporations and other avenues to feel free, to be free of whether the toxicity is out there or inside of us. There are avenues of hope.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. And thanks for the time. I appreciate it. It was a fun
No, thank you
discussion.
for being here. Yeah. And thank you everyone for watching us. Labai, how can people get hold of you?
Um, I I've got a website, so it's callaghan .com, and then my phone number is 587-229-4467, and my email is lebey, so LEBEY at callaghan.com.
And I just want to say Callahan is spelled with a G in the middle. Callaghan. So CallahanTherapy.com. Thank you,
It's a
Labai. Thank you,
silent G.
everybody, for watching. Silent G. And thank you, Fran. And if you like what we do, please subscribe, and we will be back next time with more hope.
Talk soon.
Thanks, guys.